Hello, this is Let's Talk About Myths, baby. And I am your host, Liv, back again with a reading of Statius's Thebaid. And this introduction I am very intelligently recording right after reading the last one so that I can actually remember what was in it. And so where we last left off, I'm not going to do the full recap. Last episode, I did a bit more of a recap on like the full origin story. So for now, we're just going to pick it right up where Polynices is with the king of Argos, Adrastus, and fellow hero Tydeus. And they are working on deciding whether to go to war with Thebes, aka, they are going to go to war with Thebes. It's really just this question of like how it's going to happen, what seers say yes or no. And so in Argos, they had, if I recall, a bit more of a vague pronouncement that like it's not gonna go that really well for you, but you're gonna do it anyway. And then over in Thebes, we had this like really intricate scene with Tiresias, who is of course like the most famous prophet of Greek myth, but specifically tied to Thebes and also seemingly ageless because he is in every story regardless of whether he should still be alive or not, given he is technically immortal. And Tiresias has this great scene where he talks to these shades from the underworld, like straight out of the Odyssey. It's really cool. And again, things are not looking good for this war. And yet everyone is just going to go ahead with it anyway, because obviously it's one of the most famous, it's like the second most famous mythical war from ancient Greece. So like obviously they're going to go through it, but they're also going to lead up with being like, it's not going to go well. And just like that, the kingdoms of Argos, everyone siding with them, which also we got this really great scene of like Atalanta talking to her son Parthenopaeus, and it's this whole thing. But these groups going from Argos, led by Adrastus, they're crossing from Argos through up north, leading to the isthmus of Corinth that will eventually get them over into Boeotia and Thebes. It's a bit of a long journey, and along the way they're in Nemea. And meanwhile, in Nemea, there has been some local happenings trying to prevent them from crossing through that space to go attack Thebes. And so all of the waters dry up. All of the waters, except for this one. And they have this weird conversation with Hypsipyle, who, of course, famously was with Jason before he abandoned her and then went on to Medea, who he would later abandon. With this really interesting scene with Hypsipyle. And finally, these Argives so close to death. Like they've never been closer to dying of thirst in their lives. And they find a river. And that is where we last left off. So sit back and enjoy the next very fascinating and truly bizarre epic of the Thebaid. But first, another really quick reminder that a lot of the names they use are Roman. This is a Greek myth, but they're writing it from Rome, so there's a lot of Roman crossover. You can check the link in the episode's description. There we have some real basic levels of reminders, and also really common in this epic appear to be referring to the fates by their individual names, so it's a little harder to tell who we're talking about. So if you hear the names Atropos, Clotho, or Lachesis, those are the fates. They also regularly like to use the first names of a couple of the Furies, Tisiphone and Megaera. So if you're hearing those are the Furies. And this is me just drilling in those names because I fucking love these weird and wonderful divine women of Greek myth. And speaking of divine women of Greek myth, I recorded that earlier bit right after recording the last one, and then since did some more digging into the Thebaid in preparation for reading this book 5. And I have to tell you, I'm really excited because we just get Hypsipyle's whole story here, which of course means we get more of Jason being an utter loser. And aren't we all thrilled for that? This is why I love reading epics like this, particularly ones where, it's coming so after the fact, so late in everything. And that means that they can pull from like all of these different stories that didn't necessarily exist when some of the earlier ones were being written. And so all to say, we love an epic that's like ostensibly about this war in Thebes, but also is going to tell us the story of Jason fucking over the Lemnian women and Hypsipyle. I'm so ready. Are you? Great. Let's get right into it. This is The Thebaid by Statius, translated by J.H. Mausley, Book 5. Their thirst was quenched by the river, and the army, having ravaged the water's depths, was leaving the banks and the diminished stream. More briskly now the galloping steeds scours the plains, and the infantry swarm exultant over the fields, inspired once more by courage and hope and warlike temper, as though from the blood-stained springs they had drunk the fire of battle and high resolution for the fray. Marshaled again in squadrons and the stern discipline of rank, they are bidden renew the march, each in his former place and under the same leader as before. Already the first dusk is rising from the earth, and arms are flashing through the trees. Just so do flocks of screaming birds, caught by the Pharian summer, wing their way across the sea from Peritonian Nile, where the fierce winter drove them. They fly a shadow upon the sea and land, and their cries follow them, filling the pathless heaven. Soon will it be their delight to breast the north wind and the rain, soon to swim on the melted rivers and to spend the summer days on naked Hymus. Then the son of Talius ringed round once more by a band of chieftain peers, as he stood by chance beneath an aged ash tree, and leaned on Polynice's spear hard by him, thus spoke. Nay, tell us, you, whoever you are, to whom such is your glory, fate has brought our countless cohorts owing you such high honor, as the father of the gods himself would not despise. Tell us, now that we are departing in all speed from your waters, what is your home or native land? From what stars did you draw your life? And who was that father you spoke of? For heaven is not far to seek in your descent, though fortune may have been traitorous. A nobler birth is in your looks, and even in affliction your countenance breathes majesty. The Lemnian Hypsipyle sighed. Deep are the wounds, O prince, you bid me to revive the tale of Lemnos and its furies, and of murder done even in the bed's embrace, and of the shameful sword whereby our manhood perished. Ah, the wickedness comes back upon me, the freezing horror grips my heart. Ah, miserable they, upon whom this frenzy came. Alas, that night, alas, my father, for I am she. Lest haply you feel shame for your kindly host, I am she, O chieftains, who alone did steal away and hide her father. But why do I weave the long prelude to my woes? Moreover, battle summons you in your heart's high enterprise. Thus much does it suffice to tell. I am Hypsipyle, born of renowned Thoas, and captive thrall to your Lycurgus. Close heed they gave her then, and nobler she seemed, and worthy of honor. And equal to such a deed, then all craved to learn her story, and Father Adrastus foremost urged her. Yes, verily we set in long array the columns of our van, nor does Nemea readily allow a broad host to draw near, so closely hemmed is she by woodland and entangling shade. Tell us of the crime and of your praiseworthy deed, and the sufferings of your people, and how cast out from your realm you are come to this toil of yours. Pleasant is it to the unhappy to speak, and to recall the sorrows of old time. Thus she begins. Set amid the encircling tides of Aegean Nereus lies Lemnos, where Vulcan draws breath again from his labors in fiery Aetna. Athos hard by clothes the land with his mighty shadow, and darkens the sea with the image of his forests. Opposite the Thracians plow, the Thracians from whose shores came our sin and doom. Rich and populous was our land, no less renowned than Samos or echoing Delos or the other countless isles against which Aegon dashes its foam. It was the will of the gods to confound our homes, but our own hearts are not free from guilt. No sacred fires did we kindle to Venus. The goddess had no shrine. Even celestial minds are moved at last to resentment, and slow but sure the avenging powers creep on. She, leaving ancient Paphos and her 100 shrines, with altered looks and tresses, loosed, so they say, her love-alluring girdle, and banished her Idalian doves afar. Some, it is certain, of the women told it abroad that the goddess, armed with other torches and deadlier weapons, had flitted through the marriage chambers in the darkness of midnight with the sisterhood of Tartarus about her, and how she had filled every secret place with twining serpents and our bridal thresholds with dire terror, pitying not the women of her faithful spouse. Straightway fled you from Lemnos, you tender loves. Hymen fell mute and turned his torch to earth. Chill neglect came over the lawful couch. No nightly return of joy was there, no slumber in the beloved embrace. Everywhere reigned bitter hatred and frenzy and discord sundering the partners of the bed, for the men were bent on overthrowing the boastful Thracians across the strait and warring down the savage tribe, and in despite of home and their children standing on the shore. Sweeter it was to them to bear Edonian winters and the brunt of the cold north, or, when at last still night followed a day of battle, to hear the sudden onburst of the crashing mountain torrent. But the women, for I at that time was sheltered by carefree maidenhood and tender years, sad and sick at heart, sought tearful solace in converse day and night, or gazed out across the sea to cruel Thrace. The sun, in the midst of his labors, was poising his shining chariot on Olympus's height, as though it halt. 4 times came thunder from a serene sky. 4 times did the smoky caverns of the god open their panting summits. And Aegon, though the winds were hushed, was stirred and flung a mighty sea against the shores. When suddenly the crone, Polyxo, is caught up in a dire frenzy, and deserting unwontedly her chamber flies abroad. Like a Tumesian Thyad rapt to madness by the god, when the sacred rites are calling, and the boxwood pipe of Ida stirs her blood, and the voice of Huon is heard upon the high hills. Even so, with the head erect and quivering bloodshot eyes, she ranges up and down the lonely city, wildly clamoring, and beating at closed doors and thresholds summons us to council. Her children clinging to her bear her woeful company. No less eagerly do all the women burst from their houses and rush to the citadel of Pallas on the hilltop. Hither in feverish haste we press and crowd disorderly. Then, with drawn sword, she commands silence, and prompting us to crime, dares thus to speak among us. Inspired by heaven and our just anger, O widowed Lemnians, steel now your courage and banish thought of sex. I make bold to justify a desperate deed. If you are weary of watching homes forever desolate, of watching your beauty's flower blight and wither in long, barren years of weeping, I have found a way, I promise you, and the powers are with us, a way to renew the charm of love. Only take courage equal to your griefs, yes, and of that assure me first. 3 winters now have whitened. Which of us has known the bonds of wedlock or the secret honors of the marriage chamber? Whose bosom has glowed with conjugal love? Whom has Lucina beheld in labor? Whose ripening hope throbs in the womb as the dew months draw on? Yet such permission is granted to beasts and birds to unite after their manner. Alas, sluggards that we are, could a Grecian father give avenging weapons to his daughters, and with treacherous joy drench in blood the bridegroom's careless slumber? And are we then to be but a spiritless mob? Or if you would have deeds nearer home, oh, let the Thracian wife teach us courage, who with her own hand avenged her union and set the feast before her spouse. Nor do I urge you on, guiltless myself or without care, full is my own house, and huge, yes, look, the struggle. Behold, these 4 together, the pride and comfort of their father. Though they should stay me with embraces and tears, even here in my bosom I will pierce them with the sword, and unite the brothers in one heap of wounds and blood, and set their father's corpse on their yet breathing bodies. Who of you can promise me a spirit for slaughter so great? Yet more was she urging, when yonder out at sea white sails shone, the Lemnian fleet. Exultant, Polyxo seizes the moment's chance and cries again, "The gods themselves invite us. Do we fail them? See, there are the ships. Heaven, avenging heaven, brings them to meet our wrath and favors our resolve." Not vain was the vision of my sleep. With naked sword Venus stood over me as I slumbered, plain to my sight, and cried, "Why do you waste your lives? Go, purge your chambers of the husbands who have lost their love. I myself will light you other torches and join you in worthier unions." She spoke, and laid this sword, this very sword, believe it, on my couch. Take heed, then, unhappy ones, while there is time to act. Lo, the waters churn and foam beneath the strong arms of the rowers. Perchance Thracian brides come with them. At this all are wrought to highest pitch, and a loud clamor rolls upward to the skies. One would think it was Scythia, swarming with tumultuous bucklers, when the father gives rein to armed conflict and flings wide the gates of savage war. Their uproar held no varying voices, nor did dissension cleave into opposing factions. As is the wont of a crowd, one frenzy, one purpose inspires all alike, to lay desolate our homes, to break life's thread for young and old, to crush babes against the teeming breasts, and with the sword make havoc through every age. Then in a green grove, a grove that darkens the ground hard by the lofty hill of Minerva, black itself, but above it the mountain looms huge, and the sunlight perishes in a twofold night. They pledged their solemn word, and you were witness, Martian Enyo, and you, Ceres of the underworld, and the Stygian goddesses came in answer to their prayers. But seen among them everywhere was Venus. Venus armed, Venus kindling wrath. Unwanted was the blood. For the wife of Charops made offering of her son, and they girded themselves, and at once all greedily stretched forth their right hands, and mangled with the sword his marveling breast, and made common oath in impious joy upon the living blood, while the new ghost hovers about his mother. What horror struck my limbs when I beheld so dire a sight! What color came upon my cheeks! As when a deer is surrounded by savage wolves, and no strength is left in her tender breast, and scanty confidence in speed of foot, she darts away in fearful flight, and each moment believes that she is taken, and hears behind her the snap of baffled jaws. They were come, and already the keels grated on the edge of the strand, and they leap ashore in emulous haste. Unhappy they, whom their stark valor beneath Odrysian Mars destroyed not, nor the rage of the intervening sea, and now they fill with smoke of incense the high shrines of the gods, and drag their promised victims. But murky is the fire on every altar, and in no entrails breathes the god unimpaired. Slowly did Jupiter bring down the night from moist Olympus, and with kindly care held back, I ween, the turning sky, and stayed the fates, nor ever, the sun's course finished, did the new shadows longer delay their coming. Yet at last the late stars shone in heaven, but their light fell on Paros, and woody Thasos, and the myriad Cyclades. Lemnos alone lies under a heavy sky's thick pall of darkness. Gloomy fogs descend upon it, and above it is a woven belt of night. Alone is Lemnos unmarked of wandering mariners, and now, streaming forth from their homes and through the shade of sacred groves, they sate themselves in sumptuous feasting, and drain vast golden goblets of the brimming wine, and tell at their leisure of battles on the Stremon, of sweat of war on Rhodope or frozen Hymus. No more, their wives' unnatural consorts recline among the garlands and by the festal tables, each in her choicest raiment. On that last night, Cytherea had made their husbands gracious toward them and given a brief moment of vain bliss after so long a time, and breathed into the doomed ones a passion soon to perish. The choirs fell silent. A term is set to banqueting and amorous sport, and as night deepens, the noises die away, when sleep, shrouded in the gloom of his brother death and dripping with Stygian dew, enfolds the doomed city, and from his relentless horn pours heavy drowse, and marks out the men. Wives and daughters are awake for murder, and joyously do the sisters sharpen their savage weapons. They fall to their horrid work. In the breast of each her fury reigns. Not otherwise on Scythian plains are cattle surrounded by Hyrcanian lionesses, whom hunger drives forth at sunrise, and greedy cubs implore for their udder's milk. Of 1,000 shapes of guilt, I hesitate what to tell you that befell. Bold Gorge stands over her chaplet-crowned Elymas, who on high-piled cushions pants out in his sleep the rising fumes of wine, and probes in his disordered garments for a vital blow. But his ill-omened slumber flees him from the near approach of death. Confused and half awake, he seizes his foe in his embrace, and she, as he holds her, straightway stabs through his side from behind, till the point touches her own breast. There at last the crime had ending. His head falls back, but still with quivering eyes and murmur of endearing words he seeks for Gorge, nor looses his arms from her unworthy neck. I will not now tell of the slaughter of the multitude, cruel as it was, but I will recall the woes of my own family. How I beheld you, fair-haired Chidon, and you, Crinias, with your unshorn locks streaming over your shoulders, my foster brothers these, born of another father, and brave Gyes, my betrothed, of whom I stood in awe, all fallen beneath the blow of bloodthirsty Myrmidons, and how his savage mother pierced Epopeus, as he played among the garlands and the couches. Lycaste, her weapon flung away, is weeping over Chaidemus, her brother of equal years, gazing, alas, upon his doomed body, His face so like her own, the bloom upon his cheeks and that hair which she herself had decked in gold, when her cruel mother, her spouse already slain, stands over her, and threatening drives her to the deed, and thrusts the sword upon her. Like a wild beast that under a soothing master has unlearnt its madness, and is slow to make attack, and in spite of goadings and many a blow refuses to assume its native temper, so she falls upon him as he lies, and sinking down gathers the welling blood in her bosom, and staunches the fresh wounds with her torn tresses. But when I beheld Alcimede carry her father's head, still murmuring, and his bloodless sword, my hair stood erect, and fierce shuddering horror swept through my frame. That was my Thoas, I thought, and that my own dread hand. Straightway in agony I rushed to my father's chamber. He, indeed, long while had pondered what sleep for him whose charge is great. Although our spacious home lay apart from the city, what was the uproar, what the noises of the night, why the hours of rest were clamorous. I tell a confused story of the crime. What was their grievance? Whence their passionate wrath? No force can stop their frenzy. Follow this way, unhappy one. They are pursuing and will be on us if we linger, and perchance we shall fall together. Alarmed by my words, he sprang up from the couch. We hurry through the devious paths of the vast city, and, shrouded in a covering mist, everywhere behold great heaps of nocturnal carnage. Wheresoever throughout the sacred groves the cruel darkness had laid them low, here could one see faces pressed down upon the couches, and the sword hilts projecting from breasts laid open, broken fragments of great spears, and bodies with raiment gashed and torn, mixing bowls upset, and banquets floating in gore, and mingled wine and blood streaming back like a torrent to the goblets from gaping throats. Here are a band of youths, and there old men whom no violence should profane, and children half slain, flung over the faces of their moaning parents, and gasping out their trembling souls on the threshold of life. No fiercer are the banquet revelings of the Lapithai on frozen Ossa, when the cloud-born ones grow hot, with wine deep drained. Scarce has wrath's first pallor seized them, when overthrowing their tables they start up to the affray. Then first Thionius, beneath night's cover, revealed himself to us in our distress, succoring his son Thoas in his hour of need, and shone in a sudden blaze of light. I knew him, yet he had bound no chaplets round his swelling temples, nor yellow grapes about his hair, but a cloud was upon him, and his eyes streamed angry rain as he addressed us. While the fates grant you, my son, to keep Lemnos mighty and feared still by foreign peoples, never failed I to aid your righteous labors. The stern Parcae have cut short the relentless threads, nor have my prayers and tears poured forth in vain supplication before Jove availed to turn away this woe. To his daughter has he granted honor unspeakable. Hasten you, then, your flight, and you, O maiden, worthy offspring of my race, guide your father this way, where the wall's twin arms approach the sea. At yonder gate, where you think all is quiet, stands Venus, in fell mood, and aids the furious ones. Whence has the goddess this violence, this heart of Mars? Trust you, your father, to the broad deep. I will take your cares upon me. So speaking, he faded into air again, and since the shadows barred our vision, lit up our road with a long stream of fire in kindly succor. I follow where the signal leads, and anon entrust my father, hidden in a vessel's curving beams, to the gods of the sea and the winds, and Aegeus, who holds the Cyclades in his embrace. Nor set we any limit to our mutual grief, were it not that Lucifer is already chasing the stars from the eastern pole. Then at last I leave the sounding shore in brooding fear, and scarce trusting Laius' word, resolute in step, but casting anxious thoughts behind me. Nor rest I, but must fain watch from every hill the breezes rising in heaven and the ocean waves. Day rises shamefast, and Titan, opening heaven to view, turns aside his beams from Lemnos and hides his averted chariot behind the barrier of a cloud. Night's frenzied deeds lay manifest, and to all the new terrors of the day brought sudden shame, though all had share therein. They bury in the earth their impious crimes, or burn with hurried fires. And now the Fury band and Venus, sated to the full, had fled the stricken city. Now could the women know what they had dared, now rend their hair and bedew their eyes with tears. This island blessed in lands and wealth, in arms and heroes, famed for its sight and enriched of late by agetic triumph, lost! Not by onslaught of the sea or of the foe, or by stroke of heaven, all her folk together, bereft and ravaged to the uttermost. No men are left to plow the fields or cleave the waves. Silent are the homes, swimming deep in blood and stained red with clotted gore. We alone remain in that great city, we and the ghosts that fiercely hiss about our rooftops. I, too, in the inner courtyard of my house, build high a flaming pile and cast thereon my father's scepter and arms and well-known royal raiment, and sadly do I stand by the blazing welter of the pyre with blood-stained sword and lament the feigned deed, an empty funeral in fear, should they perchance accuse me, and pray that the omen may be void of harm towards my father, and that so my doubting fears of death may come to naught. For these deserts, since the ruse of my pretended crime wins credence, the throne and kingdom of my father are given me. Punishment indeed. Was I to deny their urgent pressure? I submitted, having often called heaven to witness my innocence and to give protection. I succeed, ghastly sovereignty, to power's pale image, and to a Lemnos sad without its chief. And now ever more and more do they writhe in wakeful anguish, now openly lament, and little by little grow to hate Polyxo. Now is it permitted to remember the crime, and to set altars to the dead, and adjure with many prayers their buried ashes. Even so, when the frightened heifers behold in horror their leader and father of the stall, to whom belonged the pastures and the glory of the grown herd, lying mangled beneath the Massilian foe, leaderless and dejected goes the herd, and the very fields and rivers with the mute cattle mourn the monarch slain. But lo, dividing the waters with brazen prow, the Pelian pine-wood bark draws nigh, stranger to that wide, unadventured sea. The Minii are here, crew. The twofold splashing wave runs white along her towering sides. One would think Ortygia moved, uprooted, or a sundered mountain sailed upon the deep. But when the oars stayed poised in air and the waters fell silent, there came from the vessel's midst a voice, sweeter than dying swans or quill of Phoebus, and the seas themselves drew nigh the ship. Thereafter did we learn it was Orpheus, son of Aeagrus, who leaning against the mast sung thus amid the rowers and bade them know such toils no more. Toward Scythian Boreas were they voyaging, and the mouth of the unattempted sea that the Caenean rocks hold fast. We at the sight of them deemed them Thracian foes and ran to our homes in wild confusion like crowding cattle or fluttering birds. Alas, where now is our frenzied rage? We man the harbor and the shore-embracing walls, which give a far view over the open sea and the lofty towers. There, in excited haste, they bring stones and stakes and the arms that mourn their lords, and swords stained with slaughters. No, it shames them not to don stiff-woven corslets and to fit helms about their wanton faces. Pallas blushed and marveled at their bold array, and Gradivus laughed on the far slopes of Hymus. Then first did our headlong madness leave our minds, nor seemed it a mere ship on the salt sea, but the gods' late-coming justice and vengeance for our crimes that drew nigh over the deep. And already were they distant from the land, the range of Gortinian shaft, when Jupiter brought a cloud laden with dark rain and set it over the very rigging of the Pelasgian ship. Then the waters shudder, all its light is stolen from the sun, and the gloom thickens, and the wave straightway takes the color of the gloom. Warring winds tear the hollow clouds and rend the deep. The wet sand surges up in the black eddies, and the whole sea hangs poised between the conflict of the winds, and with arching ridge now all but touching the stars falls shattered. Nor has the bewildered vessel its former motion, but pitches to and fro, with the Triton on its bows now projecting from the water's depths, now borne aloft in air. Nor aught avails the might of the heroes half divine, but the demented mast makes the vessel rock and sway, and falling forward with overbalancing weight smites upon the arching waves, and the oars drop fruitlessly on the rowers' chests. We, too, from rocks and every walled rampart, while they thus toil and rage against the seas and the southern blasts, with weak arms shower down wavering missiles. What deed did we not dare? On Telamon and Peleus, and even on the Tirynthian, we bend our bow. But they, hard-pressed both by storm and foe, fortify, some of them, the ship with shields. Others bail water from the hold, others fight. But the motion makes their bodies helpless, and there is no force behind their reeling blows. We hurl our darts more fiercely, and the iron rain vies with the tempest, and enormous stakes and fragments of millstones, and javelins, and missiles trailing tresses of flame fall now into the sea, now on the vessel. The decking of the bark resounds, and the beams groan as the gaping holes are torn. Even so does Jupiter lash the green fields with Hyperborean snow. Beasts of all kinds perish on the plains, and birds are overtaken and fall dead, and the harvest is blasted with untimely frost. Then is there thundering on the heights and fury in the rivers. But when from on high Jove flung his brand with shock of cloud on cloud, and the flash revealed the mariners' mighty forms, our hearts were frozen fast, our arms dropped shuddering, and let fall the unnatural weapons, and our true sex once more held sway. We behold the sons of Aeacus and Anchias threatening mightily our walls, and Iphitus with long spear warding off the rocks, clear to view among the desperate band. The son of Amphitryon outtops them all, and alternately on either hand weighs down the ship and burns to leap into the midst of the waves. But Jason, not yet did I know him, to my cost, leaping nimbly over benches and oars and treading the backs of heroes, calls now on great Erinyes, now on Idas and Talius, now on the son of Tyndareus, dripping with the white spume of the sea, and Calais driving aloft in the clouds of his frosty father, to fasten the sails to the mast, and with voice and gesture again and again encourages them. With vigorous strokes they lash the sea and shake the walls, but none the more do the foaming waters yield, and the flung spears rebound from our towers. Typhus himself wearies by his labors the heavy billows and the tiller that will not hear him, and pale with anxiety often changes his commands, and turns right and leftward from the land the prow that would fain dash itself to shipwreck on the rocks, until from the vessel's tapering bows the son of Aeson holds forth the olive branch of Pallas that Mopsus bore, and though the tumult of his comrades would prevent him, asks for peace. His words were swept away by the headlong gale. Then came there a truce to arms, and the tempest likewise sank to rest, and day looked forth once more from the turbid heaven. Then those 50 heroes, their vessels durely moored, as they leap from the sheer height, shake the stranger shores, tale comely sons of glorious fathers, serene of brow and known by their bearings, now that the swelling rage has left their countenances. Even so, the denizens of heaven are said to burst forth from their mystic portals when they desire to visit the homes and the coast and the lesser banquet of the red Ethiopians. Rivers and mountains yield them passage, earth exults beneath their footsteps, and Atlas knows a brief respite from the burden of the sky. Here we behold Theseus, lately come in triumph from setting Marathon free, and the Ismarian brethren, pledges of the North Wind's love, with red-winged feathers whirring loud on either's temple. Here, too, Admetus, whom Phoebus was content to serve, and Orpheus, in naught resembling barbarous Thrace. Then Calydon's offspring, and the son-in-law of watery Nereus. The twin Ebalidae bewilder our vision with puzzling error. Each wears a bright red mantle and wields a spear, bare on the shoulders of each, and their faces unbearded. Their locks are aglow with the same starry radiance. Young Hylas, bravely marching, follows great Hercules, stride for stride, scarce equaling his pace, slow though he bear his mighty bulk, and rejoices to carry the Lernaean arms and to sweat beneath the huge quiver. So, once more, Venus and Love try with their secret fires the fierce hearts of the Lemnian women. Then royal Juno instills into their minds the image of the heroes' arms and raiment, and their signs of noble race, and all fling open their doors in emulous welcome to the strangers. Then first were fires lit on the altars, and unspeakable cares were forgotten. Then came feasting, and happy sleep, and tranquil nights, nor without heaven's will, I ween, did they find favor when they confessed their crime. My fault, too, my fated, pardonable fault, perchance you would hear, O chieftains. By the ashes and avenging furies of my people, I swear, innocent and unwilling did I light the torch of alien wedlock, as heaven's providence does know, though Jason be wily to ensnare young maidens' hearts. Laws of its own bind blood-stained Phasis, and you Colchians, breed far different passions. And now the skies have broken through the bonds of frost and grow war in the long sunlit days, and the swift year has wheeled round to the opposite pole. A new progeny is brought to birth in answer to our prayers, and Lemnos is filled with the cries of babies unhoped for. I myself also bear twin sons, memorial of a ravished couch, and made a mother by my rough guest renew in the babe his grandfather's name, nor may I know what fortune has befallen since I left them. For now full 20 years are past, if the fates but suffer them to live, and Lycaste reared them as I prayed her. The boisterous seas fell tranquil, and a milder southern breeze invites the sails. The ship herself, hating to tarry in the quiet haven, strains with her hawsers at the resisting rock. Then would the Minii fain begone, and cruel Jason summons his comrades. Would he had ere that sailed past my shores, who recked not of his own children, nor of his sworn word. Truly his fame is known in distant lands. The fleece of seafaring Phrixus has returned. When the destined sun had sunk beneath the sea, and Typhus felt the coming breeze, and Phoebus's western couch blushed red, once more, alas, there was lamentation. Once more the last night of all. Scarce is the day begun, and already Jason, high upon the poop, gives the word for sailing, and strikes as chieftain the first oar stroke on the sea. From rocks and mountain height we follow them with our gaze, as they cleave the foamy space of outspread ocean, until the light wearied our roaming vision, and seemed to interweave the distant waters with the sky, and made the sea one with heaven's extremest marge. A rumor goes about the harbor that Thoas has been carried over the deep and is reigning in his brother's isle of Chios. That I am innocent and the funeral pyre is a mockery. The impious mob clamors loud, maddened by the stings of guilt, and demands the crime I owe them. Moreover, secret murmurings arise and increase among the folk. Is she alone faithful to her kindred, while we rejoiced to slay? Did not heaven and fate ordain the deed? Why then bears she rule in the city, the accursed one? Aghast at such words, for a cruel retribution draws nigh, nor does queenly pomp delight me. I wander alone in secret on the winding shore, and leave the deadly walls by the road of my father's flight, well known to me. But not a second time did Ewan meet me, for a band of pirates putting it to shore carried me speechless away, and brought me to your land a slave. While thus the Lemnian exile recounts her tale to the Lernaean princes, and by a long plaint consoles her loss, forgetful, so you gods constrained her of her absent charge, he with heavy eyes and drooping head, and wearied by his long childish play, sinks to slumber, deep buried in the luxuriant earth, while one hand holds the grass tight clutched. Meanwhile, an earth-born serpent, the accursed terror of the Achaean grove, arises on the mead, and loosely dragging its huge bulk, now bears it forward, now leaves it behind him. A livid gleam is in his eyes, the green spume of foaming poison in his fangs, and a threefold quivering tongue, with 3 rows of hooked teeth, and a cruel blazonry rises high upon his gilded forehead. The Inachian countryman held him sacred to the Thunderer, who has the guardianship of the place and the scant worship of the woodland altars. And now he glides with trailing coils about the shrines, now grinds the hapless forest oaks, and crushes huge ash trees in his embrace. Often lies he in continuous length from bank to bank across the streams, and the river sundered by his scales swells high. But fiercer now, when all the land is panting at the command of the Ogygian god, and the nymphs are hurrying to the hiding of their dusty beds, he twists his torturous, writhing frame upon the ground, and the fire of his parched venom fills him with a baneful rage. Over pools and arid lakes and stifled springs he winds his way and wanders in the riverless valleys, and consumed by burning thirst, now flings back his head and laps the liquid air, now brushing over the groaning fields, cleaves downward to the earth, should there be any sap or moisture in the grasses. But the herbage falls stricken by his hot breath, wheresoever he turns his head, and the mead shrivels at the hissing of his jaws. Vast is he as the snake that divides the pole from the northern wane, and passes even unto the southern winds and an alien sky. Or is he that shook the horns of sacred Parnassus, twining his coils among them, until pierced by 100 wounds he bore, O Delian, a forest of your arrows? What god appointed for you, little one, the burden of so dire a fate? Scarce on your life's earliest threshold are you slain by such a foe? Was it that thus you might be sacred forever to the peoples of Greece, and dying merit so glorious a burial? You die, O babe, struck by the end of the unwitting serpent's tail, and straightway the sleep left your limbs, and your eyes opened but to death alone. But when your frightened dying wail rose upon the air, and the broken cry fell silent on your lips, like the half-finished accents of a dream, Hypsipyle heard it, and sped with faint and failing limbs and stumbling gait. Her mind forebode such disaster, and with gaze turned to every quarter, she scans the ground in search, vainly repeating words the baby would know, but he is nowhere, and the recent tracks are vanished from the meadows. Gathering in a green circle lies the sluggish foe, and fills many an acre round. So lies he with his head slantwise on his belly. Struck with horror at the sight, the unhappy woman roused the forest depths with shriek on shriek, yet still he lies unmoved. Her sorrowful wail reached the Argives' ears. Forthwith the Arcadian knight at his chief's word flies there in eager haste and reports the cause. Then at last, at the glint of armor and the shouting of men, he rears his scaly neck in wrath. With a vast effort, tall Hippomedon seizes a stone, the boundary mark of a field, and hurls it through the empty air with such a whirlwind do the poised boulders fly forth against the barred gates in time of war. Vain was the chieftain's might. In a moment had the snake bent back his supple neck and foiled the coming blow. The earth re-echoes, and the pathless woods, the close-knit boughs are rent and torn. But ever shall you escape my stroke, cries Capaneus, and makes for him with ashen spear. Whether you be the savage inmate of the trembling grove, or a delight granted by the gods, yes, would it be to the gods, never, even if you brought a giant to battle with me upon those limbs. The quivering spear flies and enters the monster's gaping mouth and cleaves the rough fastenings of the triple tongue. Then through the upright crest and the adornment of his darting head it issues forth, and fouled with the brain's black gore sinks deep into the soil. Scarce has the pain run the length of his whole frame. With lightning speed he twines his coils around the weapon and tears it out and carries it to his lair in the dark temple of the god. There, measuring his mighty bulk along the ground, he gasps and hisses out his life at his patron's shrine. Him did the sorrowing marsh of kindred Lerna mourn, and the nymphs who were wont to strew him with vernal flowers, and Nemea's fields whereon he crawled. You too, you woodland fawns, bewailed him in every grove with broken reeds. Jupiter himself had already called for his weapons from the height of air, and long had clouds and storms been gathering, had not the god allayed his wrath, and Capaneus been preserved to merit a direr punishment. Yet the wind of the stirred thunderbolt sped and swayed the summit of his crested helm. And now the unhappy Lemnian, wandering over the fields when the place was rid of the serpent, grows pale to behold on a low mound far the herbage stained with streams of blood. There, frantic in her grief, she hastens, and, recognizing the horror, falls, as though lightning struck on the offending earth. Nor in the first shock of ruin can find speech or tears to shed. She only bends and showers despairing kisses, and breathlessly searches the yet warm limbs for traces of the vanished life. Nor face nor breast remain, the skin is torn away, and the frail bones are exposed to view, and the sinews are drenched in fresh streams of blood. The whole body is one wound, even as when in a shady ilex tree a lazy serpent has ravaged the home and brood of a mother bird. She, returning, marvels at the quiet of her clamorous abode, and hovers aghast, and in wild dismay drops from her mouth the food she brings. For there is naught but blood on the tree and feathers shed about the plundered nest. When, poor woman, she had gathered the mangled limbs to her bosom and covered them in her tresses, at length her voice released gave passage to her grief, and her moans melted into words. Archimora, sweet image of my babies in my lonely plight, solace of my woes and exile and pride of my thraldom, what guilty gods have slain you, O my joy, whom, when I lately parted from you, I left frolicking and crushing the grasses in your kraal? Alas, where is that star-bright face? Where are your half-formed words and tongue-tied utterances, those smiles and mutterings that I alone could understand? How often used I to talk to you of Lemnos and the Argo, with my long, sad tale, soothe you to sleeping. For so indeed did I console my griefs, and gave the babe a mother's breast, where now in my bereavement the milk flows in vain, and falls in barren drops upon your wounds. 'Tis the gods' work, I see, O cruel presage of my dreams and nightly terrors. Ah, Venus, who never appeared in the darkness to my startled vision, but ill befell. But why do I blame the gods? Myself I exposed you to your fate, for why should I fear to confess so soon to die? What madness carried me away? Could I so utterly forget a charge so dear? while I recount the fortunes of my country and the boastful prelude of my own renown? What true devotion, what loyalty! I have paid you, Lemnos, the crime I owed. Take me then, you princes, to the deadly snake, if you have any gratitude for the service that has cost so dear, or any respect to my words, or slay me yourselves with the sword, lest I see again my sorrowing masters and bereaved Eurydice, now made my foe, although my grief comes not short of hers. Am I to carry this hapless burden and cast it on a mother's lap? No, what earth may sooner engulf me in its deepest shades? Thereupon, her face befouled with dust and gore, she turns to follow the mighty chieftains, and secretly as they grieve, lays the waters to their charge. And now the news, sweeping sudden through the palace of devout Lycurgus, had brought full measure of tears to himself and all his house, himself as he drew nigh from the sacred summit of Perseus's mountain, where he had offered sacrifice to the angry thunderer and was shaking his head as he returned from the ill-omened entrails. Here he abides without share in the Argolic war, not lacking in courage, but the temples and the altars kept him back, nor had the gods' response and ancient warning yet faded from his mind, nor the words received from the innermost shrine. In the Dircaean war, Lycurgus, the first death shall be yours to give. Of that he is afraid. He is tortured at the trumpet's sound and envies the doomed host. But lo, so the gods keep faith. The daughter of Thoas accompanies the mangled infant's funeral train, and his mother comes to meet her, leading a band of women and troops of mourners. But not sluggish was the devotion of great-souled Lycurgus. Grief emboldened him. The father's mad rage thrust back the tears, and with long strides he covers the fields that stay his wrath, and cries aloud, "Where now is she who recks little or is glad of the shedding of my blood? Lives she? Then seize her, comrades, and bring her speedily. I will make her insolence forget all her tale of Lemnos and her father and her lies about a race divine." He advanced and prepared to deal the death blow, his sword drawn in rage, but as he came, the Aenean hero, quick to act, thrust his shield against his breast and barred the way with stern rebuke. "Abate your fury, madman, whoever you are." And Capaneus likewise, and brave Hippomedon with sword drawn back, and the Erymanthian with leveled blade, were there to succor, and the prince is dazzled by their flashing swords. But on the other side, the rustic bands protect their king. Between them, Adrastus, in gentler mood, and Amphiaraus, fearing the strike of kindred fillets, cry, "Not so, I pray you, unhand the sword. Our fathers are of one blood, give not vent to rage, you first disarm." But Tydeus, his spirit not assuaged, rejoins, "Dare you then slay upon the grave, and in revenge for what a death? And before so many thankless thousands, the guide and preserver of the Anakian host, who was once a queen and has Thoas for her father and shining Euhan for her ancestor? Is it too little for your cowardice that when on all sides they folk are speeding to war, you alone keep peace among the hurrying cavalcades? Keep it then, and let the Grecian triumph find you still groaning at this tomb." He spoke, and the other, now more controlled as anger ebbed, replied, "Indeed, I thought your troops were bound not for the walls of Thebes, but here with hostile intent. March on then to destroy, if kindred murder so delights you. Flesh first your arms at home, aye, and let impious fire, what indeed is not lawful, devour Jove's temple, that but now I sought in vain, if I thought, oppressed by bitter grief, that I had power upon a worthless slave, who am her king and lord. But the ruler of the gods beholds it, yes, he beholds it, and his wrath, though late it fall, awaits your daring deeds." So speaking, he looks back toward the city. And lo, there another armed affray is raging from house to house. Recent fame had outstripped the horsemen's flying squadrons, with twofold tumults gathered beneath her wings. Some repeat that Hypsipyle is being dragged to death, some that she is even now meeting her fate and is deserving of it. They believe nor stay their anger, and already brands and javelins fly against the palace. Cries are raised to overturn the kingdom and to seize and carry away Lycurgus with Jove and all his shrines. The houses re-echo with female shrieks, and routed grief flees before panic terror. But Adrastus, aloft upon his car of winged-footed steeds, and bearing with him the daughter of Thoas in the sight of the raging warriors, drives in amongst the ranks and cries, give over, no cruel deed has been done, nor has Lycurgus deserved to perish thus. And lo, here is the discoverer of the welcome stream." So when the opposing blasts Boreas and Eurus from one quarter, and from another Auster, black with rain, has upheaved the sea, when day is banished, and the hurricanes hold sway, high on his chariot comes the ruler of the deep, and two formed Tritons, swimming by the foaming brides, gives signal far and wide to the subsiding main. Thetis is smooth again, and hills and shores emerge. Which of the gods consoled her loss, and by granting her heart's desire brought joys unhoped for to sad Hypsipyle, and recompense for tears? You, Euhan, author of her race, who did convey the twin youths from Lemnos' shores to Nemea, and were preparing a wondrous destiny. In search of their mother they came, and not inhospitably had the palace of Lycurgus given them entry, when forthwith came that message to the monarch of his offspring's piteous death. Therefore hastened they to his support. So strange is chance, so blind the purpose of men, and favor the king's cause. But when Lemnos and Thoas reached their ears, straight had they rushed through weapons and troops of men, and both with tears snatched their mother to their greedy embrace, and in turn press her to their bosoms. But she, like a stony rock with countenance unmoved, stirs not, nor dares believe the gods she knows so well. But when she recognized their faces and the marks of Argo on their swords, the mariners had left, and Jason's name enwoven on their shoulders, her grief was stayed, and overcome by so great a blessing, she swooned, and her eyes were moist with tears. Signs, too, were shown in heaven, and the drums and cymbals of the god, and the glad huzzas of his wild train resounded through the echoing air. So I'm obsessed with that one. Thank you all so much for listening. That book was my favorite thing in a long time. I mean, I obviously don't think it's great that the women just killed all the men. And like, I did a little bit forget that part of the Lemnian women story, which I can't believe I did because it's the most interesting. But like, I just really want to break down what is happening there. Like, this story of these Lemnian women who decide that they're fed up with the men. And like, obviously there's so many intricacies, but if you just look at it as like these women who are fed up with the men who control every single thing about them, but also have been gone for 3 years and can't give them like literally anything that feels like a fulfilling life to them, that they decide to like change that, you know? Like, it's really interesting, but it also simultaneously feels like this story that the men told to keep women from thinking they could dare overthrow the patriarchy. You know, it's like, well, these women tried to overthrow the patriarchal control that they lived under, and look how bad that turned out. Yeah, they really regretted it. It's just so interesting. It's so interesting. And also like giving Hypsipyle that ending, and like her sons come, and like, oh my God. Anyway, I'm obsessed with that. And you might all see an episode in the near future where I try to break down that story into further detail, because it appears in a bunch of places. But that's the place where I found the most detail in like Hypsipyle's side. Anyway, now I'm obsessed. Thank you all so much for listening. Let's Talk About Myths, Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert. Michaela Penguish is the Hermes to my Olympians, my incredible producer. Select music by Luke Chaos. The podcast is part of the Mnemosyne Memory Collective podcast network, which is a wild thing I'm trying to do. And I've misplaced the copy that I'm trying to remember to say about it. So learn more at collectivemem.com. But again, that website is, it's coming together. I'm hoping really soon. Until then, stay tuned and check out some of our other shows that I'm kind of dropping in to this feed every now and again. And these are the things I need right now, I think. I'm recording this one a little bit ahead of time, so I'm trying not to like make it too timely because I don't remember when it's going to air. But, you know, it's really hard to keep up with how terrible everything is, you know? It's just, it's tough to keep up with that, particularly, you know, just like, you know, I mean, particularly for everyone who isn't a fucking man. You know, I don't want to focus on women because trans people are having, oh my God, the worst fucking time as well. So it's just like, it is a really tough time to be not a dude, not a cisgendered dude. And finding this story that, you know, even touches upon this idea of women overthrowing the patriarchal structure that has confined them is lovely. That's something. Just kind of feels nice. Again, not great to just like kill everyone. I agree. But like the general idea of overthrowing the patriarchal structure that has controlled every single aspect of your life and makes you into like a lesser person than the men. Well, that I support. That I support. Newsflash. I was about to read the credits again. This is how well this is going. I've been up since 8 a.m. for a meeting about my Odyssey book. Things are wild. Everything's great on the personal front and terrible on the world front. Thank you all again so much for listening. I am Liv, and thank fuck, but I really love this shit. I just love it. I love it so much.